Hey folks, tonight we're leaving behind the plagues and pottage of medieval Europe and heading even further back, to a land of longships, smoke-filled halls, and an ocean wind that cuts through bone. Welcome to the Viking Age, or rather the Viking reality, because unless you're unusually frost-resistant and possess the digestion of a goat, you wouldn't last a single day. So grab a fur cloak, light a fire if you can, and let's time travel together into a world far colder, rougher, and more blood-soaked than you've been led to believe. Congratulations, you've just woken up somewhere near the coast of 9th century Norway. The good news, you're alive. The bad news, so is the winter. Your bed, if you can call it that, isn't a mattress. It's straw on a wooden board shoved up against a smoke-darkened wall. The straw smells like mildew. The blanket is a rough animal skin that sheds more than it insulates. And the lice, oh, they're thriving. You've spent the night huddled beside your family. And when I say beside, I mean elbow to mouth, knee to ribs, no privacy, no space, and definitely no deodorant. Your mother-in-law may be snoring on one side. A goat might be snoring on the other. You're not entirely sure which one kicked you in the face. There's no window to let in sunlight, just a gap in the roof where smoke from the central hearth sluggishly escapes, or tries to. Mostly it just clings to your lungs, making every breath feel like a smoky cough. Your home is a longhouse, a single, narrow wooden structure shared by people and livestock alike. Chickens wander in and out. A cow shuffles in the corner, chewing cud and staring at you like it knows how many parasites you picked up last night. You try to stretch your limbs, but it's freezing, colder than your modern brain can easily comprehend. There's no central heating, no hot shower to thaw your bones. Just cold wood, colder air, and the faint hope that the fire didn't go out during the night. It probably did. You're about 25 years old, which in Viking terms makes you middle-aged. Your back aches from sleeping on hard boards, your joints are stiff, and your breath smells like fish and fermented grain. You try to stand, but the moment your bare feet hit the floorboards, the cold travels straight up your spine like a curse from Odin himself. You shuffle toward the hearth where the embers have long since dimmed. You jab at it with a charred stick, hoping to coax some heat back into the room. No luck. You'll need to start the fire again. But before that, nature calls. So, you've made it through the first freezing moments of consciousness inside a smoke-stained longhouse, stepping gingerly across a floor soaked with melted snow, old animal waste, and some questionable brown patches that no one really talks about anymore. And now nature is no longer calling, it's howling. Here's the problem. You're 1,000 years too early for indoor plumbing. There are no toilets, no outhouses with doors, no roll of triple-ply comfort waiting by your side. The Vikings may have crossed oceans and terrified kingdoms, but they didn't invent the loo. If you've got to go, and you do, then welcome to the Nordic ritual of outdoor elimination, an experience that's as humbling as it is frostbitten. First, you stumble out of the longhouse, shoving open the heavy wooden door that's swollen with moisture. A gust of icy wind greets you like a slap across the face, and you remember too late that you're still barefoot. Every step is an exercise in pain management. The snow crunches like broken glass beneath your soles, and each twig or sharp pebble feels like a Viking curse from the gods of misfortune. There's no designated bathroom space. At best, there's a small ditch behind the house, maybe shielded by a leaning fence and a rotting plank someone once called a privacy screen. The pit, if it's not already full, is frozen over, or worse, slick with a thin crust of filth-coated ice. You squat awkwardly, trying to balance between not falling in, not exposing yourself to the wind for too long, and not catching the eye of the neighbor's kid who always seems to be wandering around at the wrong time. There's no toilet paper, no moss even. It's the middle of winter and everything is buried beneath a meter of snow. So you improvise, a bit of dry straw, a frozen leaf, your own shame, and you better hope it's enough. But we're not done. Once you've finished your undignified ordeal, you now have to consider waste management, a fancy phrase for just leave it there. Maybe you toss a handful of snow over it like some sort of ceremonial burial. Maybe you do nothing and walk away, because honestly, everyone else is doing the same. The entire village smells like sweat, wet fur, and human waste. It's less a community and more a collective bacterial experiment. And what happens come spring? All that snow melts, revealing months of wintertime deposits in glorious detail. The ditches overflow, the runoff leaks into the ground where crops will grow, and the air smells like a fermented latrine until the next snowfall arrives to bury your sins. Worried about hygiene? Good, because your hands haven't been washed in days. Soap does exist, sort of, a lumpy grayish sludge made from ash and animal fat. It smells like rancid bacon and feels like sandpaper dipped in grease. That's assuming you even use it. Most people don't. Hands are wiped on tunics, on fur cloaks, or occasionally on the nearest dog. There's no rinsing, no lathering, no singing happy birthday twice. Just filth layered over filth. And women don't think they had it easier. Menstruation is managed with scraps of wool, moss, or nothing at all. There's no privacy, no products, just the expectation to keep working, keep cooking, keep raising children, all while dealing with constant discomfort in a world that doesn't acknowledge it exists. And the worst part, in the Viking mind, this isn't even the bad part of the day. This is just how it begins. You're still hungry, freezing, covered in fleas, and now also mildly traumatized from slipping on a frozen turd while trying to wipe with pine bark. There's no breakfast waiting on the table. There's no table, just a low plank where food gets slapped down when someone remembers to cook it. And that meal, that's next. But before we get to food, take a moment. Stand barefoot in the snow. Look around at the craggy fjords, the frostbitten fields, the ever-present gray sky. You're alive in Viking Scandinavia, and the wind doesn't care. Back inside now, or what passes for inside, the Longhouse is still freezing, still dark, still damp with the combined sweat of 10 unwashed humans and a handful of resentful goats. You've survived the most primitive bathroom break of your life and stumbled back in with numb toes, chattering teeth, and a slightly broken spirit. But hey, it's breakfast time. Maybe now things will start to look up. Wrong. There's no crackling hearth, no smell of coffee wafting through the room, no sizzling bacon, no eggs, no bread, no cinnamon, anything. Breakfast in the Viking world isn't a meal. It's damage control, a hastily cobbled together act of survival before the day's suffering truly begins. You squat beside the central hearth, trying to coax yesterday's fire back to life using some splinters, a few tufts of animal hair, and breath that feels more like fog. If you're lucky, there are embers. If you're not, it's cold ashes and a long wait before anything gets warm again. A woman, maybe your mother, maybe your wife, maybe someone who serves as both in a very complicated family tree, stirs a clay pot hanging above the low flame. Inside is something that might generously be called gruel. In reality, it's a slurry of barley, water, and sadness. This is vatnskraut, or water porridge. It's what happens when you have no milk, no sweetener, and no spices. You just boil barley or oats in water until it stops being crunchy and starts being barely edible. If you're lucky, there's a sprinkle of salt, which was valuable enough to start wars over. If you're really lucky, someone found an old fish head to flavor the pot. If you're unlucky, that fish head has been used more than once. There's no bowl with your name on it. You eat from a shared wooden trough or scoop it into a horn cup. There's no spoon, just your fingers or a carved stick or the end of a bone you've used since childhood. The food is lukewarm, slimy, and gray, like eating someone else's cough. But it fills the stomach, sort of. And that's all that matters. Meat, not a chance. Meat is rare, and when it does appear, it's usually dried, stringy, and so heavily salted it could double as a weapon. Eggs are seasonal and guarded like treasure. Milk might be available if the goats haven't frozen to death or wandered off in the night. But it spoils fast and curdles in the pot unless it's turned into sour cheese, which tastes like wet socks but keeps longer. What about fruit? Sure, if you consider dried cloudberries a fruit and don't mind picking hair off them before you chew. Most fresh produce is gone by this time of year, replaced by moldy leftovers from a root cellar that smells like regret. Apples are brown and mealy, onions are soft, carrots are questionable. Everything has either sprouted, shriveled, or fermented. There's a reason Viking cuisine never made it onto TikTok. And let's talk drinks. There is water, but remember, it's probably from a stagnant well filled with frog eggs, dead insects, and maybe something worse. Boiling is an option, but fuel is scarce. So instead, you get thin beer or whey, the leftover liquid from cheese making. It's cloudy, slightly sour, and guaranteed to make your insides consider revolt. If you're from a wealthier farmstead or raided a monastery last summer, you might have a splash of mead tucked away. But don't expect to taste it often. That golden honeyed drink, that's for feasts, celebrations, gods, not for shivering nobodies like you. And don't even dream about sitting down with your meal. There are no chairs, just rough benches or the floor. You crouch beside your kin, sharing fleas and food with equal generosity, chewing quietly while smoke from the fire stings your eyes and the family dog watches you with open judgment. No one's smiling. No one's chatting. You eat because you must. Because winter takes everything if you don't keep feeding the fire in your gut. Because life in Viking Scandinavia is cold, cruel, and never full. Breakfast doesn't comfort you. It burdens you. It's just fuel for a day that's about to hurt. And hurt it will. Because now that your stomach is barely settled and your mouth tastes like old oats and wood smoke, it's time to get dressed. Or more accurately, it's time to wrap yourself in the same woolen misery you've been wearing for the past 11 months. Now that you've gagged down your bowl of liquefied barley and shame, it's time to get dressed. Though getting dressed is a bit optimistic. You're not picking from a wardrobe. You're crawling back into the same outfit you've worn for months, possibly since last harvest, and it smells exactly like that. Your clothes are made of wool, but not the cozy kind you find on Etsy. This is rough-spun, untreated, lumpy wool that clings to the skin like a moldy dish rag. It's itchy, stiff, and somehow always damp, even when it's dry. You pull on your undergarment, a linen tunic, if you're lucky, stained yellow from smoke and brown from life. On top of that, your outer tunic, thick, itchy, woolen misery belted with a braided rope or leather strap that's more decorative than helpful. There's no such thing as sizes. Clothes are made by hand, patched by hand, and slowly die on your body one stitch at a time. The elbows are worn thin. The hem is crusted with mud. The armpits, let's not discuss the armpits. And underwear. Optional for men may be a loincloth. For women, a simple linen shift. But when that linen starts to rot or tear, guess what? You just wear it anyway. You don't have a second pair. Laundry isn't a chore, it's an event. And by event, I mean hauling freezing water from a river, heating it over a fire that takes 2 hours to start, and scrubbing your wool on a flat stone until your fingers bleed. Which, by the way, you won't do, because you need your fingers to survive. So the solution, you just don't wash your clothes or yourself. You just layer on the filth until it becomes part of you. If you're upper class, you might have an extra tunic for feast days or funerals. But if you're like most people, you have exactly one set of clothes. One, worn every day until it either falls apart or is taken off your corpse. Shoes. You'd wish. Footwear in Viking times is about as useful as a wet sock in a blizzard. If you even have shoes, and many don't, they're made from thin leather stitched crudely and soaked through. No insulation, no soles, no grip, just a damp reminder that winter owns your toes. Most peasants go barefoot, through mud, snow, manure, ash, and whatever else the gods decide to throw on the path. Step on something sharp, too bad. Hope the wound doesn't fester. Hope your toe doesn't blacken. Hope you're not the next cautionary tale told around the fire. Oh, and forget gloves. If your hands are cold, you tuck them into your sleeves. If that doesn't work, you curse Thor and keep working. Your fingers go numb, blister, crack, bleed. Welcome to the Viking manicure. And then, just when you think you can't get more uncomfortable, the itching starts. Fleas, lice, mites, parasites you've never even heard of. They live in your clothes, in your bedding, in your hair. Everyone has them. You, your wife, your children, even the jarls and their smug little beards. No one is spared. Your scalp is a war zone. Your chest is crawling. Your armpits, a frontier of suffering. You scratch constantly. You bleed, you scratch again. And no one notices because everyone is doing the same thing. It's normal, it's daily life, it's horrifying. Try bathing, you say. Cute. Bathing is a luxury. A luxury. You bathe when the river isn't frozen, when your family isn't using the bucket for something else, and when you can afford to lose that much body heat. And even then, the soap you use is lye-based and feels like rubbing acid into open wounds. It doesn't clean you so much as scald the top layer of filth into submission. And the smells, oh, the smells. Body odor mingles with smoke, fermented fish, and livestock musk. You smell like a wet barn. You smell like everyone else. And that's just how it is. Now that you're dressed, you're not more comfortable. You're just officially ready to suffer outside. Every stitch you wear scratches your skin. Every seam is stiff with salt and sweat. Your clothes don't warm you, they trap your misery. And the longer you wear them, the more they become a part of you. Like a second skin. An itchy, filthy, plague-harboring skin. So you tighten your belt, scratch your neck, spit a bug out of your mouth, and step into the cold morning air. Because it's time to start your real job. The one that will destroy your spine, your hope, and your last shred of comfort. It's time to work. You're dressed in your lice-infested wool, chewing the last strands of that barley porridge between teeth that are more bone than enamel. And now, like every other poor soul in your village, you head outside. Not because you're chasing dreams or climbing a career ladder, but because if you don't work, you don't eat. And if you don't eat, you die. Fast. There's no such thing as a 9 to 5. There's no weekend, no holidays, and absolutely no retirement. There's only one rule: work until something breaks. If it's your tools, you're lucky. If it's your body, well, you just became someone else's problem. If you're a man, your day begins with labor so physical, so punishing, it might make modern gym workouts cry for their protein shakes. You start with chopping wood because your firewood from last night ran out, and without more you'll freeze tonight. The axe is dull. The handle is splintered. Your hands are already numb, but the wood doesn't care. Every swing sends shocks up your spine. Every splinter digs into your calluses. And you need to chop a lot, because heating, cooking, and not dying all require fire. Then there's the fishing if you live near the coast or a fjord, which is likely because most Viking communities hug the shoreline like cold, wet barnacles. You drag a leaking boat down to the edge of a gray, angry sea. The net is torn. The wind slices through your clothes. Your fingers are barely working. You row anyway. If the gods are generous, you'll catch some herring or cod. If they're not, you'll get soaked, nearly tip the boat, and drag home a boot full of seawater and nothing else. And if you're inland, you farm. If that word brings up visions of golden wheat fields and peaceful plowing, think again. Viking farming is pure suffering with a hint of mud. You till the earth using a crude wooden plow lashed to an ox that hates you. The soil is rock hard, frozen, or waterlogged depending on the month, and it's always unforgiving. You plant barley, rye, or turnips, not because you love them, but because that's what might survive the climate. There are no gloves. Your hands are cracked, bleeding, and filled with dirt. Your knees are soaked. Your back, a question mark. Women, they don't get to skip this party. In fact, their workload is worse. They wake before dawn to stoke the hearth, cook, mend clothes, feed animals, tend to children, grind grain into flour using a stone that takes hours to turn. And then when that's done, they join the men in the fields. And then after that, they clean, churn butter, weave, and somehow also give birth without dying. Most don't get to rest until the fire is out and the baby is quiet. Spoiler, the baby is never quiet. Children don't get a pass either. There's no school, no games, no childhood. You start helping out around age 5, maybe earlier. You fetch water from the stream, herd goats, scare crows off the barley, or spend hours picking lice out of your sister's hair while she picks them out of yours. You're tiny, cold, sore, and already losing baby teeth to rot. There's no education, just repetition, the same motions your father did and his father before him. And if you're lucky, you'll live long enough to pass them down too, still fantasizing about being a warrior. Maybe a proud Viking raider with gleaming armor and heroic tales sung by skalds. Keep dreaming. Most Viking men weren't raiders. They were farmers, fishermen, herders, and craftsmen. And even those who went raiding did so not out of glory, but desperation. The romanticized pillaging of England. That was seasonal work if you could afford a boat and not die of dysentery halfway across the North Sea. But let's say you do become a raider. You think you'll be rich, right? Maybe. Or maybe you'll get stabbed by a monk with a rusted cross while trying to steal salted fish from a monastery kitchen. Or fall overboard mid-voyage because the storm laughed at your navigation skills. Or worse, come home empty-handed and have to explain why your cousin drowned and the village goat was sacrificed for nothing. And the pay, whether you're farming, fishing, or raiding, the reward is always the same. Not dying. That's it. You don't earn money. You grow food, catch food, or steal food. You survive on what you make or what the Jarl lets you keep after taxes. There's no coin purse jingling at your belt. If you have silver, you hoarded it. If you have gold, you probably stole it. And if you're rich, you're not here. You're in a chieftain's hall drinking mead while others chop your wood. In short, Viking work is not a glorious saga. It's a slow, painful test of endurance. Every day is a new set of wounds. Your hands are raw. Your back feels broken. Your face is wind-burnt. You're cold, dirty, aching, and still expected to haul more buckets, sew more tunics, butcher more livestock, and gut more fish. And the worst part, you still have to come home to a dinner that's probably just more gruel. By now, your back is screaming. Your hands are cracked open like overbaked bread. And your stomach is loudly protesting its meal of fermented fish, slime, and oat glue. And just when you think things can't get worse, the clouds part not to reveal the sun, but to remind you that the weather is your most persistent enemy. Forget dragons. Forget battle axes. In Viking Scandinavia, it's the sky that will end you. Let's start with winter. Winter is not a season here, it's a sentence. It begins sometime in October and ends, well, maybe never. The sky is gray for weeks. The sun becomes a myth, something whispered about by children and dismissed by adults. It hangs low like a dying candle, offering no warmth, only the faintest hint that daytime still technically exists. Your longhouse offers no insulation. The walls are made from timber slabs daubed with mud and cow dung. That sounds clever until it dries, cracks, and falls out in chunks. Cold air slips through every gap. You sleep next to the hearth for warmth, but the smoke never rises cleanly. It coils down from the rafters, curling into your lungs while your feet freeze solid under a pile of rags and stale goat skins. You wake up every morning with a nose like a cold stone and fingers that don't move until noon. There's no central heating, no blankets except the ones you've sweated through for a decade. And firewood, it's a luxury. Trees don't chop themselves, and burning too much means freezing next month. So you ration the flames, curl up with the livestock, and learn to live with the cold gnawing at your bones like a slow, invisible wolf. Outside, it's worse. Snow piles knee-deep. Ice hides under every step. You walk like an old man long before you ever become one. The cold stings, then numbs, then settles into your marrow like an unwanted spirit. There's no such thing as snow days. You still have to farm, fish, gather water, and bury the dead, assuming the ground hasn't frozen solid, in which case you just stack the bodies and wait for spring. Yes, really. Now fast forward to summer. Think things improve. They don't. The warmth comes suddenly, like a cruel joke, and with it comes a plague of insects. Mosquitoes rise in swarms from every patch of standing water. Flies lay siege to your face. Lice flourish. Mites dig into your skin. Every day is a buzz of stings, bites, scratching, and blood. You're sweaty, irritable, and still working 14 hours a day. And did I mention there's no deodorant? Everyone smells like salted fish left in a barn. Heat doesn't bring relief. It just swaps one kind of suffering for another. You can't take off your clothes because that's scandalous and dangerous. The sun burns pale Viking skin to a crisp. Sunstroke isn't diagnosed. It's just called acting strange before someone finds you passed out beside your plow. Then there's the rain. Not warm rain, not gentle rain. This is sideways, soul-erasing rain. Cold needles from the sky. Storms roll in from the sea, hammering your roof with thunder, flooding your fields, turning paths into mud pits, and washing away everything you built last week. Leaks form above your bedding, your food storage, your hearth. You plug them with rags, straw, prayer, nothing works. And let's not forget the wind. The kind of wind that howls, not metaphorically, literally howls. It tears through the fjords, slaps your doors, steals your breath. It sneaks into every crack in your house and every opening in your clothes. It whistles in your ears like angry gods singing funeral songs. Still want to be a Viking? This isn't a cozy Norse winter cabin with reindeer and candles. It's endless gray, endless wet, endless cold. You don't endure the seasons, you battle them. And nature does not fight fair. So you stay damp, you stay miserable. You lose toes to frostbite, lashes to the wind, livestock to the river, and hope to the horizon. And yet somehow you get up every morning and do it again, because there's no alternative. There's no escape. And the worst part, you're thirsty, parched, desperate for water. But even that is about to betray you. You've survived the sleet, the sweat, the snow, and the stench. You've hauled wood, scraped porridge out of your beard, and fed the animals that live better than you. Now, with your lips cracked and your throat raw from smoke and sea air, you reach for the one thing that should offer relief, water. And that, my friend, is where the gods laugh. Because in the Viking Age, water is not your friend. It's not even your indifferent neighbor. It's a trickster, a silent predator, a clear-looking liquid that hides things no one wants to talk about. Let's start with your options. If you live near a stream, congratulations, you have access to ice-cold, untreated, parasite-infested water. It looks fresh. It bubbles. It shimmers in the morning light. But upstream, someone's cow just pissed in it. Or worse, someone dumped the contents of their chamber pot into it and walked away like it was no big deal. That's right. Your pure mountain spring is just a medieval cocktail of goat urine, decomposing fish, and last night's diarrheal regret. Boiling the water. Sure, if you have the time, the fuel, and a container that won't crack or catch fire. But most days you don't. The firewood's too precious, the pot's too full of yesterday's pottage, and your thirst won't wait for a science lesson. So what do you drink instead? Ale, weak ale, small beer, yes, even in the morning. Yes, even for children. This isn't a party. It's damage control. Brewing beer was the Viking equivalent of water filtration. The fermentation process, and more importantly, the boiling, killed off some of the nastier bacteria swimming around in the raw stuff. So instead of dying from dysentery in your 20s, you get mildly buzzed at breakfast and maybe live long enough to watch your goats fight in the yard. It's not good beer either. Don't imagine frothy mugs in taverns with warm firelight and laughter. This is flat, sour, cloudy liquid that smells vaguely of damp grain and disappointment. You drink it out of a horn, a wooden cup, or your hands. It's warm when it shouldn't be, cold when you want warmth, and never, ever satisfying. But it keeps your guts from dissolving, so down it goes. On feast days, if you're lucky or rich or recently successful at raiding, you get mead. Glorious golden mead made from honey, water, and yeast, sweet enough to make you forget the lice in your collar for a few moments. But honey is rare and the bees are jerks. Mead is precious. It's saved for rituals, sacrifices, celebrations, and bribing the gods. You don't chug it. You savor it while elders recite sagas and everyone tries to pretend their fingers aren't frostbitten. There's also the cloudy runoff from making cheese. Some people drink it, others gag at the thought. It's sour, protein-rich, and has the consistency of regret, but it's safe-ish. So you gulp it down and try not to think about the goat it came from or how long it's been sitting in a wooden tub in the corner of the longhouse. Milk. That depends. Fresh cow milk spoils quickly, especially in summer. Goat milk is more common but tastes like grass and barnyard. And if you're lucky enough to have some, you better drink it fast before it separates, curdles, or develops a personality of its own. And don't think bathing is a better use of your precious water. People don't bathe often. When they do, it's in freezing rivers, communal tubs, or barrels you also use to store pickled fish. Soap, if you have it, is made of ashes and animal fat. It doesn't smell nice. It just strips the top layer of grime off your skin and replaces it with the stench of boiled tallow. Some Viking settlements had bathhouses, but those were rare, steamy, and suspiciously social. More sauna than spa. Men sat in sweat huts, beat themselves with birch branches, and then plunged into ice water for that refreshed and screaming feeling. Women might have separate spaces or not. Either way, the whole process took time, firewood, and privacy. 3 things nobody had enough of. So you stay dirty, you stay thirsty, and every gulp of beer is both a blessing and a warning. Because even the safest drink comes with the risk of food poisoning, mold, spoiled barrels, and that special Viking feeling of vomiting for 12 hours, while your relatives argue about whether the gods are angry or you just ate something weird. Hydration isn't a guarantee, it's a gamble, and you're always one bad sip away from joining your ancestors. Now that your throat's scorched, your belly's queasy, and your breath smells like old cheese water, it's time to talk medicine, or what the Vikings thought medicine was. Spoiler, you're not going to like it. So, let's say your day's gone exactly how every Viking day goes. You've been bitten by insects, stabbed by a fence post, burned by the hearth, and now you're clutching your stomach with a fever that makes you hallucinate Norse gods mocking your hygiene. In the modern world, you'd see a doctor, maybe take antibiotics, maybe sleep it off. But you're in the 9th century now, and medicine is, well, experimental is putting it politely. Let's start with the basics. There are no doctors. Not really. There are healers, wise women, rune readers, herbalists, and sometimes the village blacksmith if things get desperate enough. You don't walk into a clinic. You lie on a fur-covered bench in a smoky longhouse while someone with dirt under their fingernails guesses what's wrong with you based on how loud you're groaning. The Viking approach to medicine is a cocktail of pagan tradition, rudimentary herbal knowledge, and sheer guesswork. If you're lucky, someone might know a bit about herbs. Willow bark for pain, yarrow for wounds, juniper berries to make your breath less tragic. But dosage, side effects, long-term consequences, who cares? If it didn't kill the last person, it's good enough for you. Got a toothache? Don't bother praying. They'll just rip it out with iron tongs, cold, rusted, and possibly still sticky from the last patient. There's no anesthesia, no sterilization, just a handful of mead, a mouth full of screams, and a prayer to Odin that you don't pass out and bite your own tongue off. A wound, you'd think they'd clean it. Sometimes, yes, with alcohol, salt, or, and I wish I were joking, horse saliva. Yes, because horses are considered sacred and their spit is believed to have healing properties. So someone leans a horse over your gaping gash and hopes for the best. You lie there, bleeding and reeking of stable, while everyone nods solemnly like this is a solid plan. Infection sets in. Time to cauterize. Heat a blade in the fire. Press it to the wound. Ignore the screaming. If you survive the procedure and don't die of sepsis 2 days later, you're considered blessed by the gods. And if you die, the gods wanted you anyway. But what about internal illness? What if your stomach cramps or your skin turns yellow or you start vomiting up last week's fish? Then it gets creative. You might be bled because clearly your humors are imbalanced, thanks Galen. You might be purged, forced to drink disgusting herbal brews that make you vomit because obviously the evil is inside you and needs to be expelled. Diarrhea? Excellent. The demons are leaving. Some healers recite runes and charms. carving sacred words into sticks or bones and placing them under your pillow. It won't help your fever, but it might make everyone feel better about watching you die slowly. And if you have a seizure or start speaking in tongues, you're not sick, you're cursed or possessed, or maybe you angered a land spirit by peeing near its favorite rock. Mental illness, not recognized. You're either moody, touched by the gods, or suspicious. Depression is weakness. Anxiety is cowardice. Delirium is divine punishment. There is no help. There is only suffering, and if you're too loud about it, someone might just carry you into the woods and leave you for the wolves under the guise of letting nature decide. And childbirth. That deserves its own saga of pain. Women give birth on straw-covered benches, surrounded by midwives who double as gravediggers. No pain relief, no sanitation, no guarantees. If the baby comes out breathing, that's a victory. If the mother doesn't hemorrhage to death, it's a miracle. If both survive, you throw a feast not for joy, but because you just witnessed a statistical anomaly. There are no medical texts, no germ theory, no antiseptics. If something hurts, it either passes or kills you. Your best bet is to stay lucky, avoid sharp objects, and never trust anyone holding tongs and smiling. Because in Viking times, medicine doesn't heal you. It tests you. It dares you to survive, and most don't. So now that your fever's rising, your leg is swelling, and your last hope was just trampled by a sacred goat, it's time for dinner. And guess what? That might kill you too. Congratulations. You've somehow survived a full Viking day of splinters, backbreaking labor, contaminated water, flesh wounds, and whatever the gods considered health care. You're crawling back toward your longhouse as the sky shifts from gray to darker gray, your hands still sticky with blood, sap, or possibly something worse. And now, finally, you can look forward to dinner, or at least something that vaguely resembles the concept. Let's set expectations. There's no table, no plates, no cutlery. You sit on the same bench you sat on this morning, except now it's colder and someone's probably pissed on it. The fire in the hearth is struggling, coughing smoke into your eyes as someone in the corner dumps a pot of boiling mystery onto a slab of cracked wood that used to be a serving board. This is night stew. It's not a recipe. It's a ritual. A constantly evolving, barely edible cauldron of reheated leftovers, boiled bones, wilted vegetables, and meat that may or may not be moving. You don't throw food away in the Viking Age. Ever. That stew from last week. It's still going. You just add to it. More water, more barley, more moldy root vegetables, maybe a scrap of meat hacked off something that died of natural causes. And you keep boiling it. Forever, the result. A thick grayish sludge that smells like wet fur and forgotten sins. It's vaguely warm, full of stringy chunks that could be parsnip or rat, and tastes like the inside of a soldier's boot. Everyone gets a scoop. No one complains. Complaining wastes energy, and energy is for chewing. There's usually no seasoning. Salt is precious, spices are for kings, and herbs are too busy dying under the snow. So you eat bland, bitter, mushy horror, and you're thankful it doesn't bite back. If someone does throw in a flavoring, it's usually wild garlic or stale onion, which only helps the dish smell more like something that should be buried. And what about the meat? If you're lucky, very lucky, you might get a piece of salted herring or some boiled mutton so old it predates your birth. But mostly, it's scraps, sinew, fat, bits hacked off a carcass that's been hanging in the smokehouse since before the last storm. You chew because you must, not because you want to. And you swallow out of fear that someone will take it if you don't. Sometimes someone brings out a delicacy, a fermented sheep head, a dried whale heart, blood pudding made from actual blood with a texture somewhere between liver and sadness. You eat it with your fingers, hot fat dribbling down your chin, while everyone tries not to make eye contact with the sheep's empty sockets staring up from the pot. And if you're still hungry, there's bread, hard, flat, blackened on one side and raw on the other. It's made from barley flour mixed with grit and baked on a stone that was also used to dry socks earlier. You break your teeth on it, literally. Dental care is non-existent. Bread crusts are the leading cause of chipped molars. Drink? More sour beer, maybe a gulp of whey. You sip and chew your way through a meal that could technically be classified as nutritious only because it hasn't killed you yet. You don't talk, you don't laugh. The only sounds are chewing, coughing, and the occasional scream from someone discovering a beetle that wandered into the pot. And once you're done, there's no cleaning, just licking your fingers and wiping them on your tunic, which is already stained with things no modern washing machine could forgive. The pot gets pushed back toward the fire, where it will simmer all night, bubbling like a witch's brew, collecting every accidental bug, splinter, and hair that drifts in from the rafters. Your stomach is full but not satisfied. It churns in protest, unsure if you just fed it dinner or disease. You lie down on your straw mat, wrap yourself in a goat-smelling skin, and pray your intestines don't declare civil war before sunrise. Because tomorrow it starts all over again. Unless, of course, you're lucky enough to die in your sleep. But let's say you survive. Let's say you actually live through this frozen, miserable life long enough to see old age. What then? Surely a little respect, a little rest. Spoiler, not really. So you didn't freeze to death in the fields. You didn't drown at sea. You didn't get gutted in a raid or eaten alive by your own infected wounds. Miraculously, you've made it. You're old. In the Viking Age, that means you're somewhere between 40 and 50 years old. Ancient by the standards of a society where teenagers are parents and mid-30s is considered worn in. But let's be clear. You are not retired. You are not sipping mead on a porch while watching the fjord roll by. You are not respected and pampered and called wise elder by adoring grandchildren. You are a creaking pile of scars and splinters, with teeth like crumbling stone and joints that crack louder than the ice on a spring river. Your body is finished, but no one told your workload. You still have to chop, haul, grind, gut, stir, mend, lift, carry, and occasionally fight. Even if your spine bends like a bow and your hands are gnarled into claws from a lifetime of frostbite, burns, and tendon strain, there is no rest. You're not a sage, you're free labor that can't run away. If you complain, the younger ones grunt and say things like Odin takes who he wants, and go back to sharpening axes you'll never hold again. And what does your body look like now? Imagine your worst posture. Now keep that for 30 years. Your back is warped. Your knees have been ground into gravel. Your skin is leathery, weathered, and spattered with old wounds that never healed right. Your feet are mangled from decades of frost, infections, and boots made from whatever animal died nearby. Every step you take is a bet on whether your hip will betray you. Your eyesight, gone. Hearing, gone. Digestive system, hanging on by a thread in a prayer. You cough so hard you taste blood. You fart every time you sneeze. You can't eat hard food without breaking something, and everything soft reminds you of what the dog coughed up yesterday. And your teeth. If you have more than 5, you're considered a marvel. Most are blackened, cracked, or simply gone. You've been chewing bone and bread rocks your whole life, and now your gums are so inflamed they look like they're plotting rebellion. You suck on stew. You avoid speaking too much because talking hurts and no one listens anyway. The young don't see you as wise. They see you as slow. In the Viking mindset, strength is everything. Old age isn't a badge of honor. It's a warning sign that you're next for the grave. If you can't fight, plow, or row, your value is in steep decline. You're not teaching wisdom, you're just taking up space. So what happens when you can't work at all? Well, best case, your family takes pity on you. You're allowed to sit by the hearth, carving bits of bone into fish hooks while mumbling to yourself. Worst case, you're sent outside to get some air and don't come back. There's no formal retirement, no pension, just the slow realization that food is scarce and mouths are many, and yours is now a liability. And it gets darker. If times are hard and the food is gone, and the winter has dragged on too long, there's an unspoken tradition that occasionally emerges in desperate households. The old don't starve, they leave. They walk out into the snow and just don't come back, voluntarily or not. It's not murder, it's mercy. Or at least that's what everyone tells themselves. The gods will welcome you, they say. The village will remember you. But the truth is, the snow remembers better. If you're lucky enough to die in your bed, it won't be comfortable. You'll shiver beneath flea-infested rags, surrounded by relatives who have already divvied up your knife and firewood stash. They'll whisper prayers, sure, but they're mostly waiting for you to stop breathing so they can bury you before the ground freezes solid. And the burial, a shallow grave, maybe a mound, maybe a stone, maybe nothing. If you were important, you might get a few possessions tossed in. If you weren't, you'll be buried with some straw and forgotten by next spring. In Viking times, old age isn't a reward. It's a slow surrender, a daily war against cold, pain, and irrelevance. You survive your youth to crawl into your grave one miserable inch at a time. So next time you fantasize about being a fearless Viking warrior with a big beard and a boat full of gold, remember this. If the battles didn't kill you, time would. And time is ruthless in the north. The conclusion of your miserable, frost-bitten Viking experience, and the myth that made all that suffering worth it, sort of. Part 11. Death, glory, and a one-way ticket to Valhalla. You've lived, if you can call it that. You've scraped through winters that chewed men in half. You've endured starvation, parasites, bone-snapping labor, swamp water beer, and stew that tasted like betrayal. You've watched loved ones freeze, cough, bleed, and rot, and now you lie on your straw mat, wrapped in a fur that smells like death and goat piss, waiting for your final breath. And yet, you're hopeful, because in Viking belief, death isn't the end. Not really. It's a test, a gate, a transition into something far greater, assuming you die the right way. See, not all deaths are equal. Quietly slipping away in your longhouse, stinking of cheeseway and regret. That's not glory, that's failure. That earns you nothing. No songs, no stories, no eternal feast. Just burial under cold soil while the next generation forgets your name, and your enemies loot your tools. Maybe you'll end up in hell, not hell as modern people know it, but a cold, joyless shadowland ruled by a half-rotting goddess who doesn't care if you were nice. Just dull, you lived, you died, that's it. Welcome to the basement of the afterlife, but if you died well, oh, that's different. To earn a spot in Valhalla, the great hall of Odin, you must die in battle, not in bed, not in childbirth, not from slipping on a frozen turd outside the latrine. You must die with a weapon in your hand, your blood still hot, your enemies still screaming. You must fall with honor, with violence, with your name echoing in the chaos. That's what gets you chosen by the Valkyries, warrior maidens who sweep over battlefields like crows in silk, plucking souls worthy of mead and song. If you're one of the chosen, you don't go to some cloud in the sky. You go to Valhalla, a towering, golden-roofed hall in Asgard where the feasting never ends, and the floors are slick with spilled ale and bragging rights. You fight all day. You die again. You rise the next morning to drink with the same men who caved your skull in yesterday. It's brutal, eternal, glorious. A drunken, blood-slick fraternity for the most violent alumni of Earth. And what do you eat in Valhalla? The flesh of a single beast, Sihrimnir, that resurrects itself every evening. What do you drink? Endless mead from the udders of a magical goat named Heidrun. That's right, a divine goat is your bartender now. And honestly, it's probably the most luxurious detail of Viking theology. But there's a catch. Because let's be honest, you didn't die in battle. You weren't a hero. You were a tired, splintered, lice-infested farmer who got dysentery and bled out into your straw mattress while your cousin poked you with a stick to make sure you were dead. No Valkyries came. No one sang. You didn't even get a proper funeral pyre, just a half-dug hole and a dog that wouldn't stop sniffing your foot. So what now? Well, there's always the slim hope you ended up in Folkvanger, the meadow of the goddess Freyja, who also chooses slain warriors, albeit fewer and more. Quietly, her hall Sessrimnir is less rowdy than Valhalla, less gore, more grace. But again, only the honored dead make it there. And the rest of us, we go to hell, cold, silent, dull, no feasts, no songs. Just an eternity of watching gods wage wars you'll never join, while your bones crumble beneath forgotten runestones. But here's the cruel trick. The myth of Valhalla, it's why you fought, why you suffered, why you picked up that dull axe one last time, even though your hands shook and your knees buckled. It's why your sons charged into battles they barely understood. Because if life was hell, then death, the right kind of death, was the only hope of something better. And for many Vikings, that dream was enough. Enough to endure the frost, the hunger, the rot, and the pain. Enough to keep swinging, keep rowing, keep surviving, all in pursuit of an afterlife that might be kinder than the reality they knew. But you lived like a Viking. You died like a Viking. You suffered every hour of every day in a world that was never built to love you back. And you still wouldn't last a single day. All right, let's take a moment. You've trudged through 11 chapters of frostbite, starvation, toothless chewing, battlefield dysentery, and enough lice to start their own kingdom. And you're still here, still clinging to the fantasy that maybe, just maybe, Viking life wasn't all that bad. You're picturing the aesthetic, aren't you? Fur cloaks, drinking horns, leather boots and cool tattoos. You imagine yourself on a longship, wind in your face, axe in your hand, your hair looking effortlessly cinematic as you scream into the salt spray. You see Valhalla on the horizon, eternal glory waiting like a pub with no cover charge. But here's the reality. The truth they don't show you in TV dramas and CGI-filled battle scenes. Being a Viking, a real Viking, wasn't an Instagram lifestyle. It was a meat grinder with runes carved on the side. It was dirty, ugly, cold, painful, and short. Not short like life is short, live it up. No. Short as in statistically, you're dead by 35 unless you're abnormally lucky or too stubborn to collapse. You think you'd be a warrior, that you'd stand in the shield wall, but odds are, you wouldn't. Most Vikings weren't warriors. They were farmers with back problems, fishermen with rickets, wives with 12 kids by age 30 and no surviving teeth, kids who died before they could walk, old people who were 70% skin, 30% regret. And if you were one of the chosen few to go raiding, congratulations. Now you're vomiting on a creaking ship for days, surrounded by seasick killers who haven't bathed in half a year, praying you don't crash into a rock or a storm or worse, land somewhere where the locals fight back. There's no treasure chest. There's no soundtrack. Just mud, cold steel, and your cousin Bjorn screaming because he slipped and impaled himself on a barrel of salted fish. This wasn't freedom. It wasn't empowerment. It wasn't even adventure. It was a last resort. A desperate attempt by frostbitten peasants to escape poverty by risking death on foreign shores. To come back with a silver cross, a foreign comb, a stolen cloak, or just a story that didn't end in starvation. And most of them didn't come back. They were buried in the mud, the waves, the fire, or forgotten entirely. So when you picture yourself in Viking times, remember, you wouldn't be the hero. You'd be the background corpse. The guy who froze to death outside the Longhouse because the firewood ran out. The woman who died in childbirth on a bed of straw while the midwife whispered prayers to Freyja. The child who didn't make it to their 3rd birthday because the well was cursed or the barley went bad. Still sound romantic. Still want to wear the fur, swing the axe, drink the mead. Sure, you can play dress up. You can go to the Renaissance fair. You can buy a drinking horn on Etsy and name your dog Loki. That's fine. That's fun. But don't ever forget what the Viking world really was. It was survival, raw, brutal, filthy survival. It was scraping meaning out of suffering. It was building sagas out of scar tissue. It was a life where everything wanted to kill you, and the best you could hope for was to die with a weapon in your hand and your name in someone's mouth. And honestly, that alone makes them more badass than any fantasy you could dream up. They didn't need dragons. They were already breathing fire just to live. Waking up in the Longhouse, your mattress is straw. Your blanket is a dead sheep. You're sharing it with 12 other people and a goat named Sigurd who may or may not have eaten your sock. There's no light, no privacy. The air smells like wet fur and unwashed armpit stew. Survival check. You wake up wheezing, eyes watering from smoke. You've already inhaled 3 different kinds of parasites and banged your head on a roof beam. Status. 93% alive, 40% regretting it. Bathroom situation. Congratulations, nature is calling and there's no toilet. Just a frozen trench behind the house filled with memories and bacteria. You slip, land face. First in Viking excrement, wipe with what you hope is moss, and discover it was a dead frog. Survival check, caught a cold, tetanus, and shame in one squat. Status, 76% alive, 100% humiliated. Breakfast, it's barley porridge flavored with regret. No sugar, no milk, no spoon. You eat it with your fingers while your neighbor picks lice out of your hair like he's looking for raisins. Survival check, gagged twice, swallowed something crunchy that definitely wasn't grain. Status, 72% alive, 12% traumatized. Getting dressed. You're wearing the same wool tunic you'll wear until you die. It smells like cheese, blood, and sweat layered into a second skin. You're already itchy. You haven't even moved. Survival check. Clothing causes minor psychological collapse. Status, 70% alive, 88% crawling with mites. Work time. You're sent to the woods with a blunt axe and frostbitten toes. After 4 swings, you've pulled a muscle, cried a little, and gotten a splinter so deep it qualifies as a stigmata. Survival check. Back pain, hand cramp, tree fell the wrong way. Status, 65% alive, 100% sore. Weather, it's sleeting sideways. The wind is howling. Your nostrils are frozen shut and your ear is now legally separate from your face. You forgot to bring gloves because they don't exist yet. Survival check. Suffered mild hypothermia, can't feel toes, too polite to say anything. Status, 52% alive, 10% ice sculpture. Drinking water, you're thirsty. You drink from the stream, you think it's safe, it isn't. Congratulations, you just swallowed roundworms, frog spawn, and a Viking's morning offering. Survival check, intestines declare war. Status, 41% alive, 70% filled with parasites. Injury and medical help, you tripped over a pig, cracked your knee open. Healer shows up with a rusty knife, some yarrow, and the soothing words. We might have to burn it shut. Survival check, refused help, passed out. Status, 26% alive, 84% cauterized. Dinner, it's stew, again. It's been stew for 12 days. You're not sure what's in it. You don't ask. You bite into something rubbery. Someone says that used to be the dog's leg and no one laughs. Survival check, mentally checked out. Status, 18% alive, 100% done. Death and afterlife, you collapsed during the night. No Valkyries, no battle. You choked on a beetle while sleeping and no one noticed for 2 days. They buried you with a spoon and half a turnip. Final status, you lasted 18 hours, cause of death. Inhaled goat hair plus infected stew beetle, Viking song written in your honor. None. You were forgotten by Thursday. Still think you'd thrive in Viking times. Let's be honest, most of us wouldn't make it to midday. Not because we're weak, but because we're used to living like kings. Heated homes, filtered water, medicine that doesn't involve horse spit. Viking life wasn't cozy. It was carnage wrapped in wool. It wasn't an aesthetic. It was a war against time, nature, disease, and each other, and most people lost. So next time someone says, I was born in the wrong era, you can kindly hand them this scorecard and tell them to go poop in a snowbank. You open your eyes in the dark, long before dawn, long before the men stir. There's no sunrise to greet you, just the choking warmth of stale breath and smoke curling low in the rafters of the Longhouse. Your body aches not from one bad night, but from years of lifting, hauling, bending, birthing. You're wrapped in the same coarse linen shift you've worn for weeks, crusted with blood, milk, soot, and whatever else your day threw at you. There's no bath waiting, no slippers, no coffee, just duty. You don't have time to stretch or breathe or wish things were different. The fire is dying, the children are whimpering, and someone has already pissed on the straw. You crawl out from beneath a pile of fur and skin, avoiding the legs of a snoring husband who smells like sour ale and dried fish, and you tend the hearth. Always the hearth. Your hands are raw and cracked from years of stoking coals and carving kindling, but you don't pause. If the fire dies, everything freezes: the soup, the air, the newborn twins wrapped in rags beside the wall. The goats need milking. The chickens are already screaming. Your infant is crying from hunger. Your eldest is hacking up last winter's cough in the corner, and your middle son managed to fall asleep in the ash pile again. No one else is moving. You ladle out the same gray porridge from last night, reheat it until it bubbles like tar, and begin shoving it into mouths with whatever free fingers you have. One hand stirs the pot, one hand wipes a nose, one hand keeps your own hair out of the flame, and through it all, you're nursing, always nursing, because your body doesn't belong to you. It belongs to your family, to survival, to the next generation of dirt-covered humans who might live long enough to forget your name. Once the house is fed and dressed, and by dressed, we mean scraped into the same crusted tunics they slept in, you join them outside. Because being a woman doesn't mean you get to rest. You're in the fields too. You're slopping pigs, pulling weeds, grinding grain on a stone that chews your knuckles raw. Your back is bent. Your knees pop when you squat. The baby is tied to your chest, half asleep, drooling down your front as you carry baskets of wet hay on your shoulder and dodge cow shit with the reflexes of a war veteran. If you're lucky, your husband helps. If you're unlucky, he's nursing a hangover and demanding you bring him something better than porridge. And if today is your bleeding day, tough. Stuff a wad of wool between your legs, tie your skirt higher, and get on with it. No one stopping work because you're cramping or dizzy or barely able to stand. There's no privacy, no sympathy, no soap. Just blood in your shift and mud in your boots, and the knowledge that if you slow down, you fall behind, and if you fall behind, someone goes hungry. You might be pregnant again, or maybe you just gave birth last week. It doesn't matter. There's no break between babies. Childbirth is a roulette wheel of agony and hope, where half the women die screaming and the other half survive long enough to do it all again. No midwife has clean hands. No one knows what infection is. If the baby comes out wrong, too early, too blue, too still, it's wrapped and buried before sunrise. You don't cry in front of the others. You cry in silence while you scrub the birthing blood from the floor, knowing your milk will come anyway. The sun dips behind the hills and you're still working. You prepare the evening meal, the same fermented stew you've kept alive for weeks by adding water and whatever didn't rot yet. You serve your family first, then yourself. You chew quietly because chewing is the only rest you get. No one thanks you. No one asks if you're tired. They just expect it to be there. You do the dishes in a bucket of freezing brown water. Then you mend clothes. Then you sharpen tools. Then you rock the baby to sleep while the others collapse, farting and snoring into shared straw and goat breath. You don't sleep well. You never do. Your legs twitch from standing too long. Your back throbs. Your nipples are cracked and leaking. The fire needs tending again. Someone's coughing blood. Someone's pregnant again. Someone's missing. But you can't break. You can't stop. Because you are the spine of this entire world, the invisible engine that keeps the village moving, fed, clothed, and alive. You don't get songs. You don't get a sword. You don't get Valhalla. You just keep going. Because being a Viking woman isn't about power. It's about endurance. And you either survive or you're replaced. You don't wake up because you were never fully asleep. There's no bed, no blanket. Just cold floor and an old animal skin that reeks of piss and mildew. You're curled near the doorway like a stray because that's what you are: property, a trail, a thrall, a human being reduced to a tool, owned by someone whose name you aren't allowed to speak unless asked. The only reason you haven't frozen to death is because your body has learned how to go stiff without dying. Before anyone else rises, you're already moving. You have to be. The rule is simple. If your master sees you resting, he assumes you're stealing from him. You shuffle barefoot to the hearth, get the fire going while your hands scream from cold and cracked skin. You gather water, you feed the animals, you clean the filth left behind from the night before. You carry the chamber pot, you empty it. You do it without speaking. No one asks you to, no one says thank you. This isn't kindness, it's your life. You're not allowed to eat until everyone else has had their fill, so you wait. You smell the porridge as it cooks, feel the gnawing in your gut, but you serve it with a lowered head. You carry the bowls, you wash them after. If there's any left, and there usually isn't, you scrape your fingers along the side of the pot and lick them clean. That's your meal. That's your nourishment. You live on scraps, on bones the dog didn't finish, on whatever rots slower than you do. They don't beat you often. Not because they're merciful, but because they don't need to. The threat is enough. You've seen what happens when a thrall talks back, or works too slow, or even looks too long at the wrong person. You saw a man once get hobbled for running. They cut his Achilles with a dull knife and left him to crawl like a dog. Another was branded with a hot iron after stealing bread. A woman you knew vanished after she was caught trying to poison a master's wife. No one says her name. They just gesture toward the pigsty. And yet the labor never stops. You mend, you carry, you spin, you dig, you haul water again. You shovel manure. You break your back fixing the same thatch roof that leaks every spring. You are loaned out to other households like livestock. You are passed down in wills. You are married off without choice or taken without ceremony. You do not own your body. You do not own your name. You exist to serve, and when you die, you'll be replaced. But here's the cruelest part. The world forgets you. You don't get a grave. You don't get a stone. You're buried in the outskirts with no marker. Your story is lost before it's finished. You lived an entire life, and the only record is in the rough calluses of a master's surviving children who might remember the slave who used to patch the roof. Sometimes, you're given hope. A story floats through the village about a thrall who earned their freedom, a lucky man, a strong woman, someone who caught the Jarl's eye and was granted release. It's possible. Rare, but possible. Like catching the northern lights in a blizzard. But you know better. Hope is a crueler weapon than the whip. And yet you still wake up each day and do the work. Because you have to. Because there is no afterlife promised to you. You're not dying in battle, sword in hand. You're not chosen by gods. You're not going to Valhalla. You're not even going to hell. You're going nowhere, and that might be better than where you are now. Being a Viking slave isn't about endurance. It isn't even about survival. It's about being erased and doing everything you can, quietly, invisibly, to not disappear. You don't remember being born. No one really does. But in the Viking Age, the odds were already stacked against you the moment you drew breath. Maybe you came out screaming, wrapped in blood and steam, laid on a bed of straw while your mother gritted her teeth and prayed you wouldn't die before the next frost. Maybe you didn't cry at all, and someone had to slap your back while the midwife muttered half-remembered charms to the old gods. Either way, the moment your body hit air, your life began a brutal countdown, one that most children wouldn't finish. You are not special. You are not cherished. You are not coddled. You are a mouth to feed, a body to train, a pair of hands that must one day carry water, pull weeds, or hold a blade. Your parents might love you in their way, a gruff nod, a calloused hand brushing your cheek. But tenderness is a luxury no one can afford. They've already buried too many children to believe you'll survive long enough to earn a name worth carving into wood. And so you grow if you're lucky. You crawl across dirt floors, chewing on bones, animal hooves, sticks from the firewood pile, anything you can get your hands on. There are no toys, no soft blankets. Your rattle is a stone. Your playmate is the dog. Your cradle is your mother's lap as she churns butter and bleeds into her shift. You learn to walk not because it's time, but because if you don't keep up, you'll be stepped on or left behind. By the time you're 5, you're already working. You carry buckets of water from the stream. You collect eggs. You chase chickens and herd goats. You hold the edge of your father's cloak while he butchers meat, trying not to gag as the steam rises from the open carcass. You learn to gut fish, sweep ash, twist wool, scrape dung from the threshold. No one teaches you gently. You're expected to watch, to mimic, to obey, or to be struck when you fail. Not cruelly, just practically. There's no school. The only thing you'll learn to read is the weather. The only numbers you'll understand are sheep in a pen or arrows in a quiver. Language is for storytelling, for legends, for chants around the fire. You memorize the names of gods, of ancestors, of battles and betrayals. You learn which herbs sting and which ones kill. You learn that silence is safer than questions and that crying wastes breath. Sickness is constant. Lice live in your hair. Worms live in your gut. You cough through every season, your nose runs endlessly, and if you get a fever, they give you a charm or a piece of burnt wood to chew. If you're lucky, it breaks. If not, you're carried outside, wrapped in cloth and buried next to your sister who didn't make it past 2 summers. You don't get a marker, just a stone, or a story that fades when your youngest sibling forgets the tune. If you make it to 10, you're no longer a child, not really. You're expected to contribute. Boys begin training with spears or axes, thrown into games that bruise more than entertain. Girls are handed needles and taught to stitch their own burial shrouds. You sleep less. You work more. You see blood for the first time and realize it won't be the last. You're growing fast because the world around you will not wait for you to catch up. By 12, you might be married. By 13, pregnant. By 15, dying, or worse, stuck in a cycle that never ends. There's no such thing as adolescence. No awkward teenage years. No identity crisis. No self-discovery. You are what you can produce, what you can carry, what you can endure. The gods don't watch children, they watch warriors. And you're expected to become one, or serve one, or feed one, or raise one until they're strong enough to take your place. There is laughter sometimes. There are games, wrestling in the mud, races to the stream, carving little gods out of driftwood. But even those moments are heavy with risk. You don't run too far. You don't shout too loud. The world is watching. The weather is changing. And at any moment, your life can shift from innocent to irrelevant. And if you do grow up, if you live to see adulthood, you don't celebrate. You just work harder. You're no longer protected by your youth, what little protection it gave. You're now fully accountable, fully responsible, and fully disposable, because in Viking times you weren't raised. You were hardened. You weren't nurtured. You were shaped by frost, by fire, by fear. And the ones who survived, they never called it childhood. They just called it the beginning of pain. You don't know their names. You don't even know where they come from. All you know is that the sun hasn't risen yet, the air stinks like wet smoke, and your home is on fire. You're not a warrior. You're not prepared. You're a monk, a farmer, a mother, a fisherwoman, a child clinging to the side of a wooden church while screams ring out from the hills. You thought this village was safe. You thought the sea gave life, not death. But this morning the sea brought monsters, and they came with blades. They didn't announce themselves. They didn't negotiate. They arrived in long, narrow boats with carved dragon heads and sails the color of dried blood. They glided out of the fog like ghosts, leapt to shore, and began killing. Not fighting. Killing, quick, loud, without hesitation. The first thing you hear is not the shout, it's the sound of splitting wood. Not trees, doors, walls. Roofs caving in as boots slam through them, as axes cleave through beams, as the place you called home is reduced to splinters in seconds. You run. Of course you run. But there's nowhere to go. The raiders are already in the streets, already dragging people from beds, stabbing whoever resists, and tying up the rest with ropes that look older than your church. The smell is what hits you next: blood, burning thatch, and shit. People soil themselves when they die. You never knew that until today. You see it now clearly, as someone you knew. The man who used to trade you grain for salt is hacked down while trying to shield his son. The boy doesn't even scream, he just freezes. Then he's grabbed by the hair and dragged off. You duck into a cellar, you pray, you beg, you whisper whatever words you think might work to Christ, to Mary, to Odin, to anyone who might hear. But the door is pulled open and all that comes in is cold air and death. If you're lucky, they kill you, fast, a blade to the stomach, a club to the skull. You won't see the ocean, you won't see the ship, you'll just fall. And that will be the end. But if you're not lucky, and most aren't, you'll be taken, bound, gagged, tossed into the bottom of a ship where the floor stinks of piss, seawater, and rotting teeth. You won't know where they're taking you. You'll just know it's far, days, maybe weeks. The sea is cruel, it rocks you, starves you, freezes you. And every time you think about jumping overboard, you see the spear pressed to your throat. They don't speak your language, or maybe they do and they just don't care. You're sold at market, branded, stripped, examined like cattle. If you're young and strong, you'll spend the rest of your life tilling someone else's soil, raising someone else's livestock, bleeding for someone else's harvest. If you're a woman, especially if you're beautiful, you're not sold for work. You're sold for use, as property, as breeding stock, as entertainment. There is no justice, no rescue. Your family may search for you, may light candles in the church ruins, may build a new one stone by stone and pray for vengeance. But it won't come. Not in time. Not ever. The Vikings have moved on to the next coast, the next river, the next unguarded monastery where gold shines brighter than mercy. And even if you do escape, even if by some miracle you return, you're not the same. You carry scars. On your skin, in your mouth, in your sleep. You wake up sweating, hearing waves and footsteps and screams. You stop speaking. You stop laughing. You walk like someone waiting to be struck. Because you know something the others don't. The Vikings don't just take your things. They take you. And if they don't kill you, they make you wish they had.